Hi, Nathanosaurus Rex, back once again after a bit of a hiatus to talk some more D&D and associated nonsense. Today I'm thinking about getting started as a DM, which can be a little intimidating for a lot of people. You know, if you've either been playing for a long time and you've either decided that you have an epic tale that you want to bring to your group of friends to weave together, or you just feel like your poor DM spent enough time tearing their hair out over the horror show you've made of their campaign, and maybe it's a chance to give them a little rest and retribution. Or maybe you've never played a tabletop role-playing game at all, and it seems like the only way you're going to get to scratch that itch and give it a try is by picking up the books and dice and taking up the mantle of Dungeon Master yourself, much as I did many moons ago when I was about this tall. I've only grown about 4 inches since. But where do you get started? What do you need? As well as the sort of worry about being the running the whole thing and having all eyes on you as the orchestrator of the associated chaos. I think a lot of people can get worried that they need a lot of stuff that they don't have, that they're going to be spending a lot of time and money and storage space on getting all of this stuff, that to be able to start. And that's not really the case. I mean, you can absolutely remortgage your house to spend on books and Dwarven Forge and lighting and effects and smoke machines and all that crazy stuff. Spend the GDP of a small nation on Wormwood gaming tables and all the rest of it. Especially if you've been seeing some videos that people put up online of playing games in their beautifully set up rooms. That stuff's great, don't get me wrong, but you don't need much of it. In fact, to my mind, you don't need any of it. Essentially, the only 3 things you need to get started as a DM are an imagination, a willingness to play and to take up that mantle for yourself, and at least one friend who's willing to go that journey with you. Everything else you can either make up or you can obtain for next to nothing or for free. So in terms of the actual materials that you require, essentially, if you've got the imagination and the drive to do it, you've got at least one friend that wants to play and is willing to take that journey with you, well, all you really need to get started are a pen and paper, a copy of the rules, and a way of randomizing. So pen and paper is pretty straightforward. You want some scrap, a couple of notepads where you can furiously jot down the names of the NPCs that you've pulled out of your arse because they've suddenly asked you what the name of that guy in the background who was supposed to be just a bit of flavour in the tavern, but now is seemingly the most interesting character in the entire campaign to your players for some reason. Also, you can write down little notes and pass them out to people as secrets. Essentially, keeping pen and paper on hand, both to have the notes for what you've decided to do that session, where they're going to go, who they're going to meet, what's going to try and kill them, and some more scrap paper that you can make notes on as you go to keep a record of what's happened, who's done what, who might be poisoned, whether that bad guy noticed that they picked the pocket of one of their henchmen, any of the rest of that. And taking notes. As somebody who really should take more notes, believe me, taking notes is a good thing. You'll need a copy of the rules. Now, the thought of getting into this hobby and having to drop, nearly 120 quid on a set of the 3 core books and an adventure module can seem like a massive sort of barrier to entry, but you don't need to do that. The basic rules for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons are available for free on the web. Wizards of the Coast has a PDF that you can download from their website, which gives you all of the basic rules that you need to get started and play the game for free. And if you want, you could just use those and never spend a penny on anything else. And that's entirely possible. There are plenty of, if you want an adventure, there are plenty of adventures that you can find online that people have written for either extremely cheap price to download from somewhere like the DM's Guild, or indeed completely for free. The basic rule set is also accessible through other apps such as D&D Beyond, which is super useful. I found they have a free level subscription in which you can view that basic rule set. You can view all the spells, character information that you need to create a character, to create a story, to run some of the basic monsters that you're going to find in the game, and that will give you everything you need to get cracking there. And a way of randomizing, well, dice themselves are, you can spend an enormous volume of money on dice, and if you stay in the hobby for any length of time, you'll probably spend more money than you'd probably care to admit on dice. I suspect I have, but frankly, one set of these is going to cost you a couple of quid, and to be honest, looking on somewhere like Amazon, I struggle to find, dice on there. You can buy a set of 6 full sets of dice that complete D4, D6, D8, D10, D100, D12, D20. You can buy 6 full sets of those for less than a tenner. So if you want, hard, physical, chewable dice, don't chew them, it's bad, then they're easy to obtain. If you're starting to play with a bunch of friends, why not split that cost with them? And for £1 or £2 each, you can each have a nice set of clicky clacky math rocks. Very exciting. But if you don't want to lay out on that, there are innumerable free dice rolling apps that you can download to your phone or other device. And even in browser, if you go into Google and type roll D20 or roll dice, there's an in-browser dice roller that you can use there that will give you all the randomizing of numbers that you could ever desire. D&D Beyond also have a free dice rolling app on their stuff, so there's innumerable places that you can get that. So that's essentially all you need to get going, other than finding friends and finding the time to actually get together and run it, which is arguably the hardest part. If you want to get a little further into that, you decide that you do want something physical, something hard copy, you're looking at spending a bit of money, the best place to start, I would say, would be the Essentials kit. It's got a full set of dice in, including 4d6, so that you can both roll big damage when you're throwing some spells around, and also so that you've got the 4d6 to roll at the point of character creation. It's got 2d20s included, so you can roll with advantage and disadvantage without rolling once, picking your dice up, rolling again, forgetting what you rolled the first time round, starting all over and just taking a long time making a faff of it. So that usually it sells for 25 quid. So again, if you've got a group of 4 or 5 friends looking to get together and get started with this, well, why not split that cost between you? As long as everybody's happy with that and happy with the fact that as DM, you're probably going to be hanging on to the bulk of that physical stuff yourself, because you'll need that more frequently, so you can familiarize yourself with the material, read the rules, get used to it, and actually use that to prep and run the game. But yeah, it's a great product. It's got a booklet with a basic copy of the rules. It's got dice set, as I say. It's also got a complete adventure in there that can take characters right from level 1 to, I believe, 6, which will keep you going for an awfully long time. It's got some other bits of accoutrements in there, a map that's quite nice to see. There's a set of cards that give you details on magic items and conditions, so you're not having to flick through the book to remind one of your players what it means that they're restrained or petrified or paralyzed. So that's got a lot of material in there for quite cheap, and you can usually find it on offer some places for 20 or even 17 or 18 quid. So it's a very cheap way to get started without even needing to buy the core rule books. The core rule books themselves are invaluable, but really, if you're struggling for resources, then really all you need from that would be the player's handbook itself. That tells you everything you need to play the game. It also includes some details in the back of various monsters and creatures that you can put your players up against. So if you are going to buy a book, I would say that's the book to buy. That's got all of the necessary rules for your players to create characters, for you to run the game. It tells you how combat works, how exploration works, how the spells system works. It's got everything you could desire in that. So really, getting started can be as cheap as you want it, and if you do want to buy a little bit more, it's very easy to get started for relatively cheap. People worry about miniatures and terrain and maps. As you might be able to see at the bottom of the screen there, I've got what I think's a reasonably nice setup. I've picked some stuff up over the years, bits of terrain, battle mats, but you don't actually need any of that. Most of the combat I run tends to be what we call theatre of the mind, which is a fancy / pretentious, depending on which end of that you want to say it is, way of saying in the imagination. So as the DM, you describe the situation, you describe where everybody is, you describe what the enemy is and what they're doing, and your players tell you when their turn comes around what they wish to do. They roll some dice and you narrate what happens, and which works for the vast majority of combats perfectly well. If things are a little bit confusing and people aren't kind of understanding where everything is together, you can do a very rough sketch map on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be precise. It doesn't have to be, down to the millimeter as to, what range people are in. You might want to give people a little bit of leeway in terms of distances and such, but if, you need to explain that, well, you're here, the goblins are over here, the goblin shaman's up here on a ledge, and the restrained captives are hanging from the ceiling somewhere in the middle, a quick sketch map on a sheet of A4 or notepad paper is more than sufficient to lay that out, and then you can go back to working from the power of the imagination. One thing I would say is a complete essential, regardless of what else you're using, whether you're playing from a full set of books on expensive Dwarven Forge terrain or playing Theatre of the Mind with a PDF you downloaded to your phone of the basic free rules. One thing as a DM you are definitely going to require is a cup of tea, because as the DM you are the eyes and ears and nostrils and taste buds of your players. Everything that they see, hear, feel, smell, experience, every shiver that goes up the back of their character's neck, every bellow of every monster, every voice of every person in your world, all of the narration is coming from you. So you're going to be talking a lot, like a lot, and having a hot beverage to soothe your throat is an excellent idea. Cup of tea, herbal, cup of coffee, you cannot go wrong with. Probably want to have some water on standby as well. I like a couple of beers when I'm playing, but I don't tend to drink a beer when I'm DMing, purely because if I need to nip to the loo every 5 minutes, that's effectively the game is going on pause. That can be a bit disruptive. But having some way of maintaining your voice is pretty much essential. I ran one session where I was NPCing 3 sea hags, a coven, each of which had a different shrieky, croaky, groany, different type of a voice. And as they were speaking in the round, finishing each other's sentences, I was swapping from one voice to another as every sentence was going round. And I think it sounded pretty cool. My players seemed to enjoy that. It was good fun. It sounded kind of funky, but it did absolutely shred my voice box. And if I had not had plenty of the hot brown stuff on hand, I would have been an unintelligible wreck the next morning. Oh, so you're definitely gonna want some sort of sustenance on hand in that regard. So that's literally all you need to get started. So copy of the rules, either free download, the essentials kit, or there is the starter set as well. I recommend the essentials kit over it because you get a little bit more for a beginner in there, as misleading as those two names might be. And you need some friends, pens and pencils, and you can just dive in and get going. In terms of other